sometimes like people over optimize like the creative that's working and they stick to it, but they're only targeting the same people. Sentiment online and what's actually going on in the data is pretty different.
How can you tell if it's a bug on Meta or something else?
Yeah.
How can tragic events or big cultural moments potentially affect performance? Are Meta ads performing worse over time? How is the election affecting Meta ads performance? One of the most common questions that I get asked on a day-to-day basis is, what's the most common ROAS or click-through rate on Meta ads? And today on the channel, I have someone who can actually answer all of those questions, Yarden of Varos. Varos is a benchmarking platform that can actually tell you the average data on Facebook ads, TikTok ads, and even Google ads. And what's interesting to know is I actually reached out to Yarden about 3 years ago to partner with this channel because I was so impressed with this platform. So Yarden, welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
So why don't you give yourself an introduction for people who don't know you and don't know Varos?
Varos and the problem that it solves is every company is very data driven. You know, we're all looking at our ads managers all the time, Shopify data all the time. But it's hard for us to understand, am I performing efficiently or not? Am I acquiring customers efficiently? Is my revenue growing fast enough? And the second question that you're asked all the time is this spike in cost due to me or due to the market? And we were feeling that pain, seeing that pain. And so what Varos does is companies share data with us. We aggregate, anonymize, and then tag that data, and then we show it back. So it's basically this like really big, we have 7,000 companies on the platform. So it's basically this like really, really big first party database that we made it really easy to query and get the answers that you want of how you're doing versus your competitors.
So why did you decide to create Varos? Like at what point in your career were you like, okay, this is the problem that I'm meant to solve?
Yeah. It's a pretty random niche problem to devote your life to. Yes. I worked in finance before this. I worked in banking and then in private equity and investing. And there, all day, what you do is competitive data. So let's say you're going to buy a company and you want to value that company, then you look at what other companies are valued at, what other deals were done at a certain multiple. But then when you're actually operating those businesses, which you do after you acquire them, you actually, all that performance data is blinded. Like if a company misses a quarter, misses budget in a quarter, you don't know if it was due to the market or due to you. If they're, at 15% margin, it's really, really hard to tell, can that margin improve? Like, can it go to 20% or is 15% kind of capped out and we should focus on something else? And so I sort of fell in love with the biggest problem space in the world, which is just like operating online businesses. You actually don't have any of that data. And the only way to get that data is if everyone collaborates, like if everyone shares. Like you can't scrape it, you can't do any other workarounds. And so if you could build a really good way that everyone shares but very safely, it's very powerful. So I just love that concept.
Yeah, I think sometimes when I explain to people what Varos does, I'm going to say it correctly now, Varos, not Varos, as I said earlier in this pod. But I think one of the initial worries that people have is, is my data going to be safe if I'm sharing to this platform? Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe about why you think more people should get on the platform and not be as concerned around their data privacy?
Yeah, definitely. So we wouldn't have a business if the data wasn't private. So the steps that we take. First of all, one of the co-founders of Varos was the CTO at Dun & Bradstreet, and it was a very large public data company, and in charge of securing the data there. And we work to keep all the data on the cloud. We encrypt everything, but also the steps to take around. We don't show any data if there's less than 5 companies in the specific cut that you do. We don't show anonymized data. Like we show anonymized and aggregated data. So we wouldn't say company A, company B, company C. We would actually say
because then people could like figure out what company it is.
Exactly. Yeah, like you can always back out. We don't say who's in the category. We work like we do many workarounds like what, subcategory are they in, and AOV and country and spend, and then always keep it to a minimum. So we let you get as granular as you can, but still stay very safe. And, that's proven that like thousands of companies have signed up for Varos. Publicly traded companies use Varos. And so, we've passed all their data privacy rules.
Awesome. Yeah. Like I said, that's one of the most common questions. Like it's like the only question, because people are like, yes, I want this data. I want to see what the average click-through rates and CPMs and ROAS and spend is for my category. And what's so cool is you go beyond a little bit than just health, wellness, B2B, e-commerce. You can actually go a little bit deeper and be like, men's fashion. Yeah.
Eco-friendly fashion.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which is why it's such a valuable tool. So now I actually kind of want to get into some of that data, right? Yeah. So like the most common question I get asked on this channel is, okay, Dara, what is the median CPM, CPC, click-through rates on meta ads? Can you share this data once and for all?
So let's go through some of the numbers. I'll say that like category, size, product price, region, like all these stuff is very nuanced and important to look into specifically for you. But on a broad perspective, so what we're seeing for the past 12 months on Meta, so CPM, median CPM is $14.2. Median click-through rate is 0.91%.
A little lower than I thought on the click-through rate, to be honest. So, I get a lot of people, they see their click-through rate dip below a 1% and they start freaking out and calling me. And I'm like, actually, seeing this, it's kind of, and I think too, another thing to contextualize this data as well is this is mostly conversion to purchase brands, right? Exactly. Okay, cool.
That's really important. Okay. And another important thing, like to your point is we spoke about this a bit offline, is that when you're benchmarking and even when you're looking at your own data, like the data needs to be looked at in a funnel. And like click-through rate, like this click-through rate, the 0.91, there could be low performers that have, a 2% click-through rate, but their CPM is super high or their conversion rate is super low. And so, Meta for an e-commerce brand or many times a SaaS business is optimizing for the conversion. It's not optimizing for the click-through rate. So in a situation that, a high performer could have low CPMs and middle of the road click-through rates. And so, that's what we're looking at here. So every metric, like you first need to benchmark how you're doing on your North Star KPI. That's ROAS, cost per purchase, CPC. And then if it's not good enough, then you need to go in and see what is far off versus the market. Yeah. But if ROAS is really good and then everything else is like middle of the road, like you're not great, you're not bad. But like if the whole funnel gets to the ROAS targets that you want or it's above the benchmarks, you shouldn't really be playing with like the underlying variables. Yeah, I've talked with a lot of brands that are like, oh, we're getting the purchases. We have the ROAS, we have the LTV on the back end. But if we could just increase the click-through rate by, a certain percentage point, and I'm like, this is it's like a red herring. It's the wrong thing to be going after. And it can often, suck the life out of your creative team, your media buyers by trying to optimize for this metric. That isn't actually the metric that you want to be improved. Right. Exactly. So I know we have a few more metrics on here. Let's go ahead and dive back into that and then we'll continue on. Okay. So just to recap, CPM 14.2, click-through rate 0.91, cost per click $1.65. And then when you get into conversion, so conversion rate, median conversion rate is 3.2%. Median cost per purchase is about $50, 50.1, and ROAS is 1.83, and the median AOV here is about $90. I think the AOV one is really interesting when I talk with new brands who are just starting on Facebook ads, because they'll ask me,
could we sell a $20 product, for instance, and get a cost per purchase of like $5? And I'm like, that's going to be really, really tough on this platform now. And I think it's also, when looking at the average cost per purchase in this and backing into that data, it's like, okay, do you have $50 to acquire your best customer? It's kind of tough. Yeah. It's kind of tough.
What's also really surprising, or surprise a lot of people when they look at Varos, is we see almost all the time higher AOV products have higher ROAS, and like very high AOV products. Like let's say $300, $500, $1,000 products. Which in a way makes sense, right? Like you have more money to spend because the product
acquire your
costs
customer.
More.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like, how many people will really buy a couch for $1,000 on ads
without testing it out, doing the whole thing? Yeah.
Exactly. But it actually, you see that like these high AOV products actually have a lot more like really high ROAS, like 5+.
Yeah.
Where it's just hard to get to at the $80 AOV, $90, $100 AOV.
Yeah, and something actually in the work that I do a lot with brands right now is figuring out how to increase that AOV so that we can be able to have that ROAS make sense on that first purchase.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. When I started my career, I was very much a media buyer. What types of interest should we use to target? And what type of ads should we put on? And now it's like, I just see the media buyer role being changed from media buyer to creative strategist to product expert and full funnel expert. And it's just never stopping.
Yeah, totally.
Now, another thing that I really like about Varos as well is all this, like what I would call standardized benchmarking data. Awesome. But you also have data on hook rates too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We have data on like a lot of, we get into like the full, let's say like video creative funnel on Meta.
Very cool.
You could see like, PMAX performance, YouTube performance, and like, distribution of spend. So it's really like, we take like how is my overall business doing from like an MER and LTV to CAC perspective, and then how are my ads doing, and then even within the ads very specifically. So if you take like your example in hook rates, so we're seeing median hook rates are about at about 25%.
So would we say that a good hook rate is 25%, or is that just like middle of the road?
Middle of the road could get better.
Yeah, could get better. I agree. I'm like, I will be impressed if I see a hook rate of like 40%, and like a minimum for me is like 35%.
Yeah. And you see a lot of times like the way that we show like a video ads funnel is like you start at hook rate, and then you see like percent 25 to like 25% viewed, 25%, 50%, and then you get all the way to the click-through rate. And a lot of times you see like not that good click-through rate and not that good view rates, and it all comes back to the hook. Like that is the first thing to diagnose if it's not good enough, because like everything that you optimize under the hook, you already lost a lot of people from that. So
it's kind of like Ogilvy said that your headline of like in the print era, like the headline is 80% of your dollar. It is 5 times more important than anything else in an ad creative. And when I look at modern advertising, and particularly UGC or video creative, like the hook is the new headline. And if you're not nailing that, you're already losing.
Yeah. If you don't, you just lose so much. Like if you go to 1 million people and you lose 80% of them, 75% of them, which is the median, it's a huge hit.
And so to actually backtrack on what we said earlier is, sometimes brands will want to increase their click-through rate. I think it's actually a lot safer to increase qualified traffic from using the right hook in your video creative.
Totally. Yeah.
So I want to dive into a question that I have been asked a lot and that I see asked on Twitter all the time. And I think you're the man to answer it, which is, are meta ads performing worse over time?
Yeah. So
he looks away because he's like, gosh. I'm thinking,
I actually have like, I feel like I'm always the guy that is like sort of coming out with different views than
I change my mind on it all the time.
Yeah. So like, I'd say sentiment first of all, like if we talk about sentiment for a minute online, like sentiment's pretty negative.
Yeah.
Pretty negative. Like I think people are seeing a lot of times these bugs happen, which I think we'll get into, but like, they're seeing increased costs and so forth. When we dive in to look at the reality of what's going on, first of all, if you actually look into what's going on, spend is increasing on all these platforms. And if you take a economic, just classic economics for ads, when spend increases, the cost should increase as well.
Yeah.
Meta has actually done a pretty good job at keeping costs somewhat stable and even improving a little bit, like improving ROAS. Like ROAS in 2024 in the first half improved 5% since last year, where spend increased 30%. So actually, it's like they're actually doing a good job.
Yeah.
I think when you think about the overall picture, though, 2022 was a horrible year for brands on Meta.
Yeah. The post iOS 14 year.
Exactly. And so there was a 40% decrease in ROAS that year.
Woof. Yeah, I felt it.
which is insane. And we are still coming back from that. So 2023 was a good year. It was about 35% back up.
Yeah.
But like if you think about, like, not to get too mathy, but if you like start at 100, you lose 40%, you're at 60.
Yeah.
And then you go back up even 40%, you're back at like 80 or something like that.
Yeah.
So you're not at that base. And 2024 only had that 5% increase. So we're not near the base that brands are used to. Brands have sort of built their business off of like, this is the number that we need to get.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a big part of brands being bummed. But actually, like, but actually, like, Meta is performing pretty good. It has these like fluctuations that are pretty scary and pretty annoying.
And like we hear a lot of the big players in the space, like when they happen to them personally, and it kind of feels like the world, world or like your business is in jeopardy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, totally. But like from your perspective, then, like Meta as a whole seems stable.
It seems stable, and like share of wallet, like something we track a lot is like share of wallet between Meta, Google, and TikTok, which I think is like a pretty telling sign because, e-commerce brands, B2C SaaS businesses, they're very, very performance driven. If something is not performing, they shift spend to something else or they turn it off. They're not just wasting dollars.
Yeah.
So the fact that spend has shifted more towards Meta in the past year, and it's already the behemoth. I mean, it went from like 65% of share of wallet to 75, 80% of share of wallet. Like it is the main place.
Yeah.
Like that also is telling towards performance. So sentiment online and what's actually going on in the data is pretty different.
Yeah. And I'd say too, looking back to 2022, there was a huge interest also in TikTok ads as a platform.
Yeah.
And I remember it was, objective number one for brands to diversify their spend. If this is the year of creative diversity, I feel like 2022, 2023 was like the year of like diversifying your platform spend. Yeah. And people were starting to shift to TikTok, but we weren't seeing that direct response performance from it, which is why we ultimately shifted our budgets back to Meta.
Exactly. Yeah. Spend is being shifted from TikTok. I think people are, using TikTok in different ways, influencers,
shops,
affiliates, shops. But yeah, it's kind of gone back from that year or 2 years of like diversity of channel back to let's do what we know.
Yeah. So I want to go back actually to talking more about these performance abnormalities, because the way that I personally use Varos is I have a few different use cases, right? So every time I'm onboarding a brand to work with me, I always love to really zero in on the amount of money that they're spending on Meta and TikTok and their other platforms, and really get a zero in on their industry and make sure we have the right spend thresholds, the right demographics or whatnot. And I like to see, okay, how does their data in general, maybe the last month, maybe the last few months, compare to their competitors or to other people in the space, right? While also looking at Meta as a whole. Because I think having a good idea of what's going on platform-wise versus industry-wise is really, really important. Like, I think that we can talk about the platform-wide data until we're blue in the face, but it's really much more important to talk about the industry-specific data. So I like using it for onboarding. I also use Varos on a monthly basis. So if I'm doing reporting for the brands that I'm working with, I like to see, hey, looking at their month-over-month data, how is that comparing to people in the space?
Yeah.
Did someone big in the space increase spend? What types of, how did that potentially affect us?
Yeah.
And the big one, the third use case, is when there are abnormalities in the account. Because I can't tell you, it's so common where I'll be working with a brand and they'll see performance dip. And sometimes it's outside factors, right? Sometimes it's due to holidays, to cultural events, to tragic events. And we'll see performance take a dive. And it's really nice to be able to look inside of a platform and be like, okay, is it just me? Is it the platform? Or is it something that other people are experiencing? So the question I have for you is, how can you tell if it's a bug on Meta or something else?
Yeah. And I would say it's to tell, it's not just nice. I think it's like a big money thing, because if you're wrong, right? Like let's say your ads are optimized and then you have a cost increase and you say, oh my God, something is off. Yeah. And you start changing it, you re-trigger learning phases on Meta. You start changing the optimized ads to non-optimized ads, or your optimized website to non-optimized website, where nothing was wrong. It was still optimized. It was just happening to everyone. So it's really important to know. It's a main reason, similar to what you're saying, that many people use Varos. And so, basically how you can tell is like Varos's dashboard updates in real time. By real time, in reality, it's like 4 hours, I think. So pretty close. We're trying to make it better. Yeah. But even
4 hours, that's pretty good.
4 hours is pretty good. I think we're up there.
What's the alternative? There is no alternative.
Yeah. And so you can like see for, let's say it's like a intraday thing, then you would take like last 7 days, change the date granulated day. It's really simple to do. And then you'll see like your line spike up, and then you look at the other lines. So we show like low performer, median, high performer. Usually what I like to do is like take off the low performer, take off the high performer, and just look at you versus the median and see like if that spike happened to everyone else. And that's how you can have a good sense of if it was others. We've seen that about 70% of the time where these irregular fluctuations happen, it's actually a macro trend.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like a separate trend. And why that is, those reasons differ. Like, for example, I think it was a few weeks ago or a few months ago that there was sunny weather in England. When it was like a rainy month. In England, it rains a bunch, right? And so like there was like a sunny day and costs spiked. And it's because everyone was just out. Everyone like
good for you, England.
Like CPMs were the same because like people were selling, but like no one was buying something because people were in the parks. And
as
so
they should be.
And so it's like whether it's that or whether it's an algorithm bug on Meta, which is also happening more and more. And
that is interesting to say. We are seeing more like platform fluctuations, I'd say.
And to like, which makes sense, right? Because like, if you think about how the media buying process has evolved, you do give more trust to the machine. And it's an algorithm. And when you make a change to the machine, sometimes things get a little crazy. And I think we'll only see more of that because like these things are so complicated, and it's a net positive because like what I was saying before is like they need to do this because the spend has gone up so much. It's gone up, 30% every year. And and they need to keep performance it can't get 30% more expensive every year. So they need to somehow, make it more automated and make like the distribution of the creatives to the different formats be more efficient. So they need to do it, but we'll see a lot more of it. And you need to know when that's happening or when it's you. It's like very critical.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to hear that and they're going to be like, because I feel like as media buyers and business owners and founders, we're like, okay, how can we become more efficient? How can we optimize? And this is kind of like a thing where we just kind of have to grin and bear it while the best platform in the world figures it out because they are setting the tone for what other platforms are doing. There is no alternative.
Yeah, there's not.
There's not.
Like net new demand.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah. And I know something that you and I were talking about offline as well is, again, a lot of the big players in the space have really big microphones. And when they say there's a platform abnormality, that can, those kind of things can kind of like run away from people and like get them to overcorrect and optimize maybe when they shouldn't.
Yeah, totally. It's something that happens way too often. And even, by the way, these algorithm changes, I don't know why, but like when these bugs happen, even then, it's not that everyone gets affected. Like there was like that huge thing in February and everyone is like, world is on fire.
Yes.
But we saw that 40% of advertisers were affected, which is a lot, but it's actually still like technically the minority.
Yeah.
So like obviously like there's something, but it's also like, even if you see all these things happening on Twitter and things like that, like go in your own account. If your own account is really spiking and you see in Varos that like this is also happening, then okay. That's that. But sometimes it's like, just because it's happening to another person, like it's not necessarily happening to you.
Yeah. Because I'd say, before Varos, when we would see these platform abnormalities, I would have a brand tell me like, okay, what's happening with your other accounts? What other conversations are you having with advertisers? And that was all the data that we had, which again can be a real false flag.
Yeah. Also, because that's not category specific. Like so often, like increase in costs. Let's say like, you're a apparel brand and maybe you're like a fast fashion, lower cost apparel brand and Temu comes in and spends, billions of dollars in a month. Then your CPMs are going to go up. But like, you're a wellness brand, your CPMs aren't necessarily going to go up.
Yeah.
And so it's also like category dependent. You can't just go to like a random person.
Yeah. So I think like my favorite part about this conversation and just talking to you in general is some of the fascinating data stories that you've seen recently. So I would like you to tell us a few that maybe you've seen recently, because I think that this, number one, gives us a lot more context for how we should be viewing benchmarking data and how we can contextualize what's happening in our own ad accounts at times.
Yeah, totally. And so we like at Varos, I mean, we do a lot of these different analyses and then like put them in to like a meta analysis, then put it in the platform so you can see where you are compared to that analysis in your category and so forth. So a question we get all the time, sure you get all the time, is how many creatives should we launch a month?
Oh gosh, yes.
How many? It doesn't matter. Do the, like if I want to spend, 6 figures per month, if I want to spend 7 figures per month, how many creatives do I need? So we ran that math. Basically, the way that we did it is we looked at a given point, how many creatives were live that had over 20 impressions, which basically means like has spent.
Yeah.
And so what we saw and then we broke it down into buckets of spenders of 10K to 100K, 100K to 500K, 500K to $1 million, and $1 million plus.
Cool.
So look at the differences.
Yeah.
And so usually these questions are also coming from the smaller ones because like the 10K to 100K, their goal is always like, I want to scale profitably. I want to scale profitably. How do I get to that? And so the 10K to 100K, we saw on average, they had 103 creatives live at any given time. Where to get to that 100K to 500K, there's a huge jump to an average of 335 creatives live. And so like,
wow,
that difference, this like data really shocked a lot of people because like that difference is really big. It speaks to like really a difference in like strategy,
Yeah.
org structure, like capacity, and so forth to get
Because to
that.
be able to just make 300 ads. And I know that some of these, were maybe like creative that was performing well over the last few months. So it's not something that they're creating new all the time.
Exactly.
But even just to like sit back and think, wow, the average 10K to 100K ad account has 100 ads in it at any given time. Is that also broken down then by obviously different videos, different images, but also like different pieces of copy and stuff? Or are they just looking at it through each individual like unique asset essentially?
It's being looked at like based off the amount of ad IDs.
Okay.
That have it. So I guess it is. Copy differences.
It would be.
Yeah.
It would be, which I think makes sense too. And I think too, as brands begin to scale, that's when they also start doing a lot more split testing or using multiple versions of primary text, which is something I do recommend brands do.
Yeah.
But that jump is massive.
It's crazy. And then from that jump, like to get to the 500K and to get to the million is more modest. Like 335 creatives for 100K to 500K versus 425, 423 for 500K to a million. Like that's more reasonable. Like I think if they're already making 350, they can make 450.
Yeah.
And over a million is 460. So it's kind of that like between 300 to 400 sweet spot. That's there. And I like the really interesting thing is we also broke it down by ranges.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you can see that as you get larger, there's very few that are only running like a few creatives. Like most are running a bunch of them. And like the argument is also, well, when you're running a lot of, like if you're really good at making creatives, like some people will say like, well, you only need a certain amount of creatives if they're really good. But the point is like, if you're really good at making
fewer
creatives,
better creatives is something I hear. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. That's not what we see in the data. I mean, again, all these things is like, this is what we see on a macro basis. This is what we see others doing. And like, it's really helpful, but you also need to look at what you're doing and like some strategy, like a strategy will work for every, like a certain strategy will work for a certain company.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that's not what's going on.
Yeah. It is super unique to brand, demographic, even format or whatnot. And it's interesting because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about my own journey with scaling brands, like from, I've scaled brands from 30K to like $1 million per month in ad spend and what it took to get there creative wise. It's always down to like, I think when you're spending 100K, you're able to potentially like find that like winning unicorn ad, which is why then you're not having the exponential growth of like the need for creatives from 500K to 2 million per month. Because generally around that area, if you find something that really nails it, really works, you can kind of ride that for a while or iterate and double down. So you're not having to take as many big creative swings.
Yeah, interesting. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So another question that I have for you when looking at especially like the share of wallet and like the spend between the different platforms is there an arbitrage opportunity in 2024, you think? I know a lot of people are talking about TikTok shops right now. I personally work with a few brands that are on TikTok shops right now and it's tough. Yeah. And I'm like, is this the arbitrage that everyone was talking about? I don't know. But like from your perspective, you have a bird's eye view on the share of wallet. What's your perspective? My perspective
is that there's always arbitrage opportunities in ads.
Music to my ears.
Because like the again, like if you think about the overall market dynamics, there's pressure for the ad platforms because there's increase in spend. Yeah. And so they need to reinvent themselves. And the way that they've been reinventing themselves is new ad formats. Yeah. So, Google is coming out with all these new formats with the discovery and shorts. And, like a bunch of different places to put in
Shorts
YouTube.
ads. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And, Meta is like, if you think about the evolution of Meta, right? It's like started Facebook and then became Instagram and then added stories and then added reels, and like they keep adding more and more and more. And obviously in between then like adding ads on the profile and ads here and there. And so, and every time one of these new formats comes in, naturally, most advertisers aren't spending there yet because it's new. But actually, like they're a lot of times very efficient because the CPMs are a lot lower. And so, like we have a view in Varos that what it does is it breaks down total share of wallet spend by ad format. And then how that's changed year over year. So if, like we look at some of the data, like TikTok Shops has only 1.3% of share of wallet spend. We track about $7 billion of spend annually. So it's something, but it's still very small. Like only about 100 brands on Varos out of 7,000 use TikTok Shops.
That's surprising. I feel like it'd be more, but
it'd be more. Yeah. One caveat to that one is like people do use it as affiliates. Like people do use it as like affiliate and not necessarily ads. But yeah, there's a lot of hype around it. But it's still very new, and new is good. Like new, like unadopted.
New is the arbitrage opportunity. Yeah.
So there's also like this thing like Facebook Reels overlay, which has only 0.7% of the share of wallet, but it grew 4x year over year. So it's growing really fast. And basically like, maybe you've seen it, like, it's like, yeah, you have Reels ads, but then it's like, what this is during the actual reel, there's like a little bubble on the bottom.
It's like the banner ads.
Exactly. It's like a banner ad kind of.
Yeah.
But like, Meta was able to do it. Like it looks kind of classy and it seems to be working. And so it's like, someone can look at this data and then say, okay, you know what? I'm going to run like a decent sized test of like optimizing like
just for
Facebook Reels overlay, which is, pretty specific, but it's new and not that many people are really using it and really spending on it. And you can get like very efficient purchases there. And these things are constantly going on. Google Discovery grew 1.5 times since last year, but still very small. And so there's a lot of these type of things where things are also decreasing in spend as well. So like constantly looking at this data, looking at Varos and saying, hey, I'm going to go run that test this month, as just one of your experiments that maybe you can push.
Yeah. I think too, this gives you the opportunity to be way more strategic instead of tactical. And instead of doing, we're going to be doing like a minute, like creative strategy test or test a new platform, those, like our format. And those things are super, super important. But I think this kind of data gives people the ability to be like, okay, how can we potentially grow faster and in a bigger way through an arbitrage, so to speak? I want to talk about top performers in general, because one of my favorite views on Varos is the ability to see, of course, the median, which we're going to be doing a lot of our benchmarking data across, but we can also see low performers and high performers. And I want to, I think like when I see that, I immediately am like, I want my brands that I'm working with to be in the top performers. From this bird's eye view, what are the top performers doing that maybe some of the, median to lower performer brands, what are they doing differently?
Yeah. So first of all, like let's talk about like what makes a top performer. So like within Varos, we give the user the power to decide what how you set it. So the default is the top third in terms of cost per purchase or CPA.
So like the most effective cost per purchase.
Exactly.
So,
the lowest third of cost per purchase, like out of all the filters. So let's say you set like a women's apparel, $250 to $600 AOV, spending $50K to $250K. Out of that cut, who has the best third? Who's the 33% of companies? And then you take the median of that group. And so like if you think about a view like that or a view like with that in ROAS, I'd say that the main things that we see is a lot of diversification. So first of all, it's around creative types. So
like different creative formats.
We barely see high performers that have significantly larger weight on a specific creative format. So like really the best is like 50 video, 50 image. Things like that. And it's interesting because like Meta like the individual performance metric on a specific video may not be very high, but like the spend as percent of the ad account can be really high. And the reason why that is, and the reason why like this diversification is important, is Meta is amazing at saying, okay, this video is a good introduction to the brand and to the product. And then that static image that you have that has like a crazy high ROAS is like the fourth touch point that they have. But
which will actually get the conversion and show the conversion.
Exactly. But like actually the whole mix is really important. So sometimes I see people say like, oh, but my statics are converting way better. My videos are converting way better. So I'm going to like go all out on that. But really it's the mix. And like people need to be introduced to your brand in many different ways, different and formats and stuff like that. Like that's where DPA also comes in a lot to like have that close. And so like just the diversity also in the same sense, like testing a bunch of creatives, having a bunch of creatives live. So Meta has the opportunity to say, oh, that creative for this person is going to work really well. Let me give it to them. And having many different creatives for the different touch points. Yeah,
it's interesting. I was actually looking at Loop, so Loop earplugs. I from what I understand, they're one of the top performing brands right now on Meta ads. I don't have this data. So if someone from Loop hears this, no one gave me this data, but I actually just perceived that because of the amount of creative diversity in their account. I was looking at them on Spider. So using Foreplay, looked at Spider, and I was able to see that, number one, they have over 5,000 live ads in their account right now. But the kicker, which is exactly what you were saying, 55% of them were images and 45% were videos. So there was that equal creative diversity. Carousels, still not getting quite the same performance. I'll see little blips in time where like, oh, a carousel will really knock it out of the park, but it has been ages since I've seen like a top performing carousel, in terms of like a uniform creative. But that for me really visualized like, wow. And not just, the different formats, but how different they looked visually. Like if I put up 20 of Loop's creatives up on a PowerPoint and I sat back and I squint, they're not all the same. They're all super different. And I think that's what real creative diversity means, not just video and images, which I do think is important. And you're right, that's like the beginner entry level point for it. But I agree, brands really do need to make sure that they have sort of an equal amount of both. If you're like, that's like a good goal, I'd say, for many brands to go for.
The way I look at it is like you're giving Meta and Google more ammo to use for you. Like the more you give them, the more tools that they have to be able to optimize it for you. It's the same thing of like sometimes you have like something that we see is sometimes like a user, like a brand is very heavily spending on like, let's say like a demographic of a gender with like a 10-year gap, like women 45 to 54, but like not really getting into the others, where you see high performers are more diversified in the sense it's not that they're targeting all women, right? It's still like let's say that they're targeting older women, they'll still be though like distributed across 45, 54, 55, 64, 65 plus. Like they'll have a pretty good distribution there.
And different creatives can fit into those different demographics.
Exactly. So sometimes like people over optimize like the creative that's working and they stick to it, but they're only targeting the same people because like that creative works for this demographic. But like at some point you got to the low hanging fruit and you need to test out, because you need to test maybe like a creative that will work for a younger audience or an older audience, and then go optimize that. And like you need to be driving that to constantly grow your business and get to new people.
So we only have 5 more minutes. I have 2 big closeout questions for you, and then I want to give you the hard sell on Varos, because I'm a huge fan of the platform, and I think every brand and agency should be using it. But 2 questions that I've been asked a lot this year. Number 1, how is the election affecting Meta ads performance?
Yeah. So just to give the quick answer. So we looked back at data from the 2020 election. And at the start of 2020, CPM, from a CPM perspective, it was a good year over year. It was down actually 20% CPMs year over year. By the time we got to November and election season, CPMs were up 13%. Year over year. So there is actually a relatively significant impact here.
So like CPMs can increase during election season.
Yeah, they probably will. Yeah. They probably will. They won't increase by like 50%. Yeah. But most likely they'll increase by 10 to 20%. And
I think that's something that a lot of advertisers, like, they expect, but they expect it to be wildly disruptive.
Yeah. For Google and Meta, by the way, like we saw a similar.
Yeah. Another thing too, and I think we touched on this when, we see potentially a meta bug or something, is, how can tragic events or big cultural moments potentially affect performance? Is it in a similar capacity, or?
It's similar. It's like maybe most similar to like the weather example I gave, which is like, people are kind of still on their phones, but they're not clicking, they're not buying. Someone, I don't know, someone gets assassinated, God forbid, or some the Olympics are going on, everyone's on the TV. It's a little bit less
The user
converting.
experience is way different. Yeah, I agree. Because I find that like with the Olympics on right now, I'm not even really watching the Olympics this year.
I haven't got to it either. I wish I did.
I'm going to Paris next week, though.
Are you? Wow.
I didn't realize it was going to be the Olympics.
Wow.
It was a mistake on my part. But what I mean to say by that is like sometimes these things like users are interacting with like Meta and Instagram in a very different way than they normally would. Yeah. And I think that will very obviously translate to their buying behavior.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much again for coming up on the channel and talking with us. Like, seriously, when I first learned about what you were creating, I was super, super excited, because I think being able to have that data is really, really powerful. As a media buyer, as a creative strategist, as a business owner, I can't tell you how many times brands and businesses looked at me and they're like, hey, this data fluctuation is happening. Like, what's going on? Yeah. And I feel like with this in my toolkit, I can tell them what's going on, which is really powerful. So thank you so much. If you want to give the hard sell, I'd love for people to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So for agencies, let's say, so first agencies use Varos a lot in sales pitches and audits.
I definitely did. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, a new brand comes in, you could say, hey, look, like compared to the comps, you're at a 2x ROAS, you could be at a 3.5. Your biggest problem is in click-through rate being too low. Here's how we're going to improve your click-through rate from 1
or
to
your
2%.
hook rate, because sometimes click-through rate won't be as
exactly exactly. So it's a lot of that, and it's a lot of the data I presented today is from Varos. Like it's from the dashboard. Like I know how to work around it pretty good, but like everyone can do it. Like agencies, their job or part of their job is to be in the know of what's going on around you, what's going on to others, and Varos gives you superpowers to know what's going on, not only within your client base, which we let you filter through, but also across externally. And then for brands specifically, we spoke about they could see how they stack up. It's like a table stakes thing. Like, am I acquiring customers efficiently? Is my AOV in the right range? Is my retention rate correctly? And so really understanding that, seeing how you stack up every couple weeks, checking that, doing a deeper dive for like monthly and QBRs. And then seeing, if these cost increases happen, is it just you or is it the market? So going into Varos to check that, and also understanding what are you doing differently from a strategy perspective compared to the high performers? Are you in all exact keyword match type where the others are doing broad keyword match type on Google? Are your creative distribution very different than the high performers in your category, and so forth? So it's like really this should be your guide to what you also test next in the next month. So it's just like knowing what's going on around you, what's working, like actual cold hard data in that. I mean, I think it's pretty important. So,
yeah, it's super powerful. Well, I know that we are going to have an offer for people through this channel. We're going to have a link in the description bar. I'll also put up the code and post right here for you guys. And if you have any questions for myself or Yarden, be sure to put in the comments below. And we'll try to answer as many of those as we can.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much.